Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Simple C10. We're going to get back on the Sunny build. This is a 1960 Chevrolet C10 Apache, and we've got a lot in store because we're going to install rear shock relocation kit on this truck. So if you've been watching me for the past 4 years, you have seen me do it a bunch of different ways on these builds. One of the ways that I did it was take the factory brackets and switch the sides from driver's side to passenger side and then weld on a bracket onto the notch. You've seen me create the do-it-yourself bolt-in rear shock relocation. That worked pretty good. And my most recent method that I've been using on all my builds is the 10 Works Fabrication rear shock relocation kit. Sell a ton of those on the website. That's what's on Lucky. It works great. So over the past 4 years, I've learned what I like about a rear shock relocation kit, and I've worked that into a new design. I've designed a upper bracket, a lower bracket, and then I've tried out 4 or 5 different shocks to get the perfect length for your truck. We'll talk more about the rear shock relocation kit here in just a second, and that's pretty much going to be it on the budget portion of leaving your bags on the trailing arm. But after that, I've designed a bag over axle setup. So a lot of people have been asking, hey, what if I want to move the bag placement from the trailing arm onto the rear end to get the truck to sit down those couple inches more? So I've designed a kit that's going to go with my simple bridge that's going to weld in, and it's going to be an upper and lower bag bracket. Check this out. For those that are new here, this is the simple bridge. So you just weld this to connect the notches together, and I did a rounded design here so the Watts link doesn't contact it no matter what your notch height is. But here is what I've designed: an upper bag mount that's going to weld in to the rounded part of the simple bridge. So it's going to have an on-axle bracket that welds on, and then you're going to weld this plate into the top of the simple bridge, and it's going to mount that bag right on top of the rear end. And what that's going to do is allow us to remove the bag. When we take that bag out and we put the bag over the axle, we'll be able to move that rear end further into the notch and lay this truck all the way out with this kit. But wait, there's more. Alex V and I have been working on a 4-link, a parallel 4-link that mounts to the side of the frame for these trucks. So after I do the bag over axle setup, I remove the bag from there, I test that, then guess what? We're going to take the trailing arms off of this truck and put a 4-link on the side of the truck. The main goal of doing all this is to give you guys options. So you'll be able to mount the bag on the trailing arm with the simple bridge and the Watts link like normal, like I've done on Lucky and my other builds, or you can take the bag off, do bag over axle with trailing arms, and go ahead and lay the truck out that way. Or if you want a 4-link, take off the trailing arms, bolt in and weld on that 4-link with the bag over the axle with the rear shock relocation. I'm giving you options to do multiple things depending on your goal. So we're going to be able to lay frame on this truck with the bag over axle setup. All the parts that I just talked about are going to be available on the website, simpleC10.co. I'm going to have full back half kits that have the Watts link, the bag over axle setup, the rear shock relocation, everything to get the back half of your truck done. Or I'll sell the parts individually: the 4-link, the rear shock relocation, the Watts link, the bag over axle simple C10 bridge, and all that is going to be available for you. And hopefully that helps you have different options, right? You don't have to build your truck exactly like I've built the past couple of trucks. You're going to have all the tools and the videos that you need to do it a lot of different ways. As I mentioned before, if you've been following me for multiple years, you've seen my videos. The very first way that I ever did my rear shock relocation, I took the factory brackets and I put the passenger side on the driver's side, which put the shock bracket out here. Then I mounted the shock to the side of the notch. And I just did that by using one of these studs like this right here, just welded to the side of the notch. And it worked fine, but it seemed like the geometry was off. You couldn't get a very long shock doing it that way. So the next one, I tried to do a bolt-in setup that bolted in to the side of the notch. That way people that didn't have a welder, they could just bolt on, and that worked well. On my last couple builds, I've switched to the 10 work style that mounts to the bottom of the trailing arm. It comes out here, and then you weld on their bracket to the top of the notch, and it sticks over the notch, and it works really good too. That design was actually made for a mini notch truck, but I fabricated it and made it work on this style. My friend Stan that I bought Lucky from sent me a rear shock relocation kit that kind of looked like the Porterbuilt shock. It had the stud shock with the bracket up top that he had fabbed up himself, and I really liked that idea. So I took that idea and started making different brackets for it for this truck. I've taken my experience of installing rear shock relocation kits on a couple different trucks now, and I've designed this kit. So this is going to bolt in to the lower trailing arm, and it's going to give you your stud mount. In the kit, I am going to include these shock studs that fit perfectly in the stud, so there's no wiggle room and it fits tight. Those are going to bolt in there. And then for the upper bracket, what you're going to do is take this upper bracket and you're going to weld that to the top of the frame, just like this. Weld it to the top of the frame, mount the shock in the bottom of the trailing arm, and then mount your stud right here. So I've measured a bunch, and I want to get the longest shock that I can. That way I can get the most travel. The problem with a lot of shock relocation kits is this shock only gets about 6 inches of travel. So when you air the truck up, you're only getting about 6 inches of travel, and then it basically bottoms out or it tops out and you can't move any further. So with these, when I was choosing a shock, I wanted to get the longest shock that I could. So these KYB shocks right here have 11 inches of travel. That is awesome. It's the ones that work the best. They fit in great. They bolt in with the rubber studs up top. I'll show you that in a minute. But these will give you 11 inches of travel. That's probably going to be more travel than your truck can actually move up. But what that's going to do is when you jack the truck up to get the wheel off, it's going to give that shock more room to kind of pivot down if you're jacking one side of the truck up instead of maxing out. This kit is going to be available on the website. It's going to be the simple rear shock relocation kit. It's going to come with the 2 trailing arm brackets, the 2 upper brackets, the 2 studs for the shocks, and then 2 long shocks that are made for these trucks. So this is going to be a universal kit basically for any truck that has trailing arms. These will work with 60 to 62, 63 to 72, and you could use these with a square body as well, but you would have to weld in some lower shock brackets. But I may make a kit for square bodies later on. I would just have to change the bottom bracket. So check these out on the website. All right, went ahead and painted these up a little bit, and all you do is unbolt the bottom of the trailing arm. We're going to slide these on the U-bolts and go ahead and tighten these down. Then we'll install the shock stud. You'll see on the 60 to 62, the shock stud in this bracket is going to be pretty close to the frame rail right here. But on the 63 to 72, where the actual notch goes down and kicks in, there's much wider gap there. So the kits that I've created, they'll work for the 60 to 62, but they work even better for the 63 to 72 as far as the shock clearance. This is how you determine the height of your upper bracket. So this is going to be different for every different notch. Lots of different manufacturers make notches. This is a straight notch for a 60 to 62. I measured to have it about right at the top of the notch so I can get the most lift out of the shock. So what you'll do here is you'll just slide the shock into the bottom, just like this. Slide it in there, angle it up, and you'll want to push the shock all the way down, compress it all the way down, and remove your upper rubber and bracket. That way we can slide the bracket in between. So right here, we'll slide this bracket in between, and you can see you've got a perfect fit right there at the very top. And that's how I designed it, is I wanted this to mount to the very top of the notch. That way I get the max lift. So what we'll do, I've got this marked, it's almost flush with the top of it. So I will grind down the frame here, and I'll come in and I'll tack that bracket down. Take your shock and then see how high this shock is. That's how much extension. I've got those bags aired up almost all the way, and there's still 4 or 5 inches more of travel that it can go. So we tested it all the way down that it'll compress, and then all the way up. You see how tall these shocks are. That's why I like these shocks, because if you're jacking up one side of the truck to get the tire off, then this allows your Watts link and this side to flex a little bit. And worst case scenario, you just unbolt your bag. If you're having trouble getting your wheel and tire off, just unbolt the bag from the bottom and let the rear end flex down. I know that's one of the common issues with these trucks, is it's hard to get the wheels off. So that's one of the reasons why I swapped to this setup. So again, all you do, mount the shock on the bottom on the stud. It fits nice and tight. Push down on the shock. Make sure you've got your metal piece and then the rubber piece, and it is just going to slide up in the hole like that right there. You'll take the upper rubber piece, put it on top, put the nut on there. This shock is going to come with 2 nuts, one to tighten down and another nut to go on top to lock it in. I'm just going to put the one on here right now just to do some test fitting. Now you'll want to snug these up really good. That way it pulls it really nice and tight, and as you're adjusting the shock, it's not moving anywhere. And you'll feel whenever it gets tight right there. Another reason I like these shocks is this rubber bushing right here is going to just give you a little bit more flexibility. There's plenty of clearance right here in the frame. As I mentioned, the 60 to 62 with the straight notch, this is going to be closer to the notch than on the 63 to 72 where the notch kind of kicks back. Then you'll have a little bit more clearance right here between the notch. But let's do the other side. I'm going to tighten the bottom down right here, and we'll go and we'll do the other side. All right, let's check these out. This is extended all the way up. This is the bag inflated to about 90 psi. It'll go higher, but I didn't want to overfill the bag. But you can see the shock clearance in there. It just simply mounts up to the bottom stud right there. Straight shot. Looks great. It's tucked way out of the way from the wheel and tires, so you can run a nice wide wheel in the back with it. And again, I mentioned it will get 11 inches of lift, a bunch of lift without maxing out. You don't have to worry about that. And it looks great, man. I'm pumped. All right, here is the test. We need to air out the truck and see them compress. So let's check that out. There it is, all the way aired out. You can see the bag completely compressed right there. And it looks great. Very happy with how these turned out. They just look super sleek and clean too, just all blacked out right there. So I think this is my favorite setup so far of the rear shock relocation, just because easy to do. Just bolt right in, weld in that upper bracket. I like the stud style right here. And the reason I chose this is, with it being a stud, that means the geometry can change left to right, back and forth. And with a standard shock, you've got that pivot point. And if any angle to that pivot point, it starts to ruin your bushings on the inside of your shocks. So with this setup, it's not going to put anything in a bind because it's free to move up top. That's why I like this setup. On a 63 to 72, the notch is actually about this much higher on there. So the shock mount wouldn't be directly on the top of the notch. So you could mount it a little bit lower than that notch. And then that way this is maybe even with the top of the notch. But for this setup, I like it a lot. I think it looks really good. I think it's versatile. You can use it on lots of different types of builds. I'm pumped for this rear shock relocation. This is awesome. This is everything I wanted it to be. Let's check this out. So this is the main thing. I just wanted a bunch of lift, as much lift as possible. So I tried a bunch of different shocks, and this shock right here got me almost 12 inches of lift. So I've got the bags aired up all the way, and there's still this much shock left to go. So that is awesome. The clearance is good. It's tucked really nice into the frame. It just looks really good. Man, I'm pumped for that. The last step of this is to weld on the simple bridge. So on the simple bridge, I'm just going to grind down the notch right here where I'm going to weld it in. I'm going to use a large clamp to clamp it in strong. On the 60 to 62, the 36-inch simple bridge is going to fit in here just right. On the 63 to 72, you will have to trim it down. Just measure from side to side. I would just put a hair a little bit longer, so when you put it in there, it kind of holds itself into place. So let's grind this down, put the front bar in there, and weld it in. If you plan to do the bag over axle, you want to make sure where your axle aligns is where the upper bag plates are going to be. I've already kind of set it on here, and I know that if I put that bar right on the front, it's going to align my plate just where I need it. So what I would do if you're doing bag over axle, get your axle where you need it first, put the bags with the brackets on there, set it on there, then hold your simple bridge up and align it, and then mark it. That way you can weld it in where it needs to go. The best way to do these is there's one side that's flat and one that is round to the actual curve. If you'll put the flat part up against the notch and then just let it sit right there where it goes, that's usually a good spot for it right there. That way, because you know it's flush against the frame, and then you can tack it in right there. Let that cool off a little bit. Put some paint on it, take some pictures, and then grind the paint off and weld on the brackets for the bag over axle setup. You're probably wondering, dude, why you keep spray painting everything and then grinding it down? Well, guess what? I need pictures for the website, and I want to have nice pictures of just the simple bridge without the bag over axle, and I like it to look really nice, and that's just kind of how my mind works. So I cause myself more work to have nice pictures, and then I'll just grind it down, and then I'll do it again, and that's okay. We got the simple bridge done. I'm super excited about it. I'm going to show you, and this is what I'm calling the basic back half kit. So what you're going to get in the basic back half kit is this. The basic back half kit is going to be all the items that I usually use, besides I'll have the new rear shock relocation kit. So it's going to have the simple bridge, the notch, the VeloWorks rear do-it-yourself slam kit, the Watts link, and the rear shock relocation, and the rear bag template. So basically everything that you're going to need from here back to accomplish the look that we have here. So we've got, again, the rear shock relocation that we just put on here, the VeloWorks rear do-it-yourself slam kit. I use the rear bag template to mount the bag directly to the frame. I've got the Watts link and the simple bridge. So all that is going to be the basic back half kit. That way, if you're on a budget and you buy all the stuff for the front, get that done, and you move to the back, you can buy it in sections, the basic rear back half kit. I'm psyched with how this turned out. The rear shocks look great. The slam kit on the Tenworks arms, the Watts link just looks awesome. That simple bridge to tie everything together. But all these parts are available on the website. Check them out. You get a really professional look on a budget. I'll have them for the 60 to 62, 63 to 72, and we already have a rear back half kit for the square bodies that utilizes the 4-link and everything like that. So next on the agenda, now that we have this done, is to do the bag over axle kit, which we're going to mount bag brackets right there on the simple bridge. We'll mount the bags directly to the rear end, and then we'll remove the bags. So you may be wondering, why are we going to move the bags over the axle? Aren't they fine on the trailing arm? Well, here is the situation. Whenever you mount the bags directly to the trailing arm right here, it can only go down so far, and then that bag is maxed out on the internal bump stops. And whenever it does that with the 4.5-inch block, that's the biggest block you can go. You're still about 1.5 inches from laying frame. It's still level with the stock cross member. That's how I've done Lucky and all the other trucks, stock cross member with bags on the trailing arm. But this truck has a Porterbuilt front drop member, so it lays all the way frame. And then right now the back is about 1.5 inches off the ground. So how can we use what we have now and go ahead and lay the truck out? And this is how we're going to do it. If you currently have this set up with your bag mounted on your trailing arm and you're trying to get that other 1.5 inches, maybe you have a pancake cross member or a drop member, you Z'd your frame and you're trying to move your back, I will sell just the bag over axle brackets for the simple bridge. You can take your bag, mount it over the rear end, and whenever we remove that bag from there, that trailing arm can move up further, because right now it's maxed out. It's like a bump stop there. But if we mount it up here, then guess what? That bag can deflate and that rear end can go down and you can get that extra 1.5 inches. So whenever we get ready to install the actual bag bracket here, there's a couple different ways that you can do it depending on your setup. With the 60 to 62 notch here, it's lower, so I'll probably have to end up mounting the bracket on top, because you'll put the bag here, and when the bag deflates, you don't want it to deflate and then max out and not drop the truck all the way down. So on a 63 to 72 with a taller notch, you could probably take that bracket and mount it on the bottom, and that way you would still have enough room here for the bag to compress and the truck to lay out on the ground. So that is something you want to mock up. You can go ahead and take your bag out and lay the truck on the ground, and then mock up your bag over axle kit with the bag to make sure it will lay frame before mounting up the bag. Here is the bag over axle bracket kit, and this is going to attach to the simple bridge. These just weld on. These mount on to the bags and weld on to your rear end. You can see it's got a curved part here. So what we'll do is take the bags, we'll mount them to these brackets, and then on the bottom brackets as well, we'll sit it into the simple bridge onto the rear end. We'll let the frame down to make sure it maxes out to see, okay, the frame is all the way on the ground and the bag has not fully compressed yet. Basically what we want is right when that frame is going to touch the ground where you're laying frame, that's right where you want the bag to compress all the way. That way when you air the truck up, it gets the most lift. You don't want the truck laying on the ground and then the bag isn't fully compressed, because you're barely going to lift the truck up when you air it up. So you want to mount these all the way down as far as you can right when the frame touches the ground. So that's what I'm going to do, is just mount these up. I'm going to see if I can put it on the top of the simple bridge or on the bottom depending on the height. Let's go ahead and just hand tighten the brackets to the actual bag. These brackets are made for 2,500 bags, 2,600 bags. These are SS6s. Or SS7s will go on the back. If I was doing it, again, if I didn't already have these SS6s, I would have put SS7s just to have a bigger bag on the back if you're doing bag over axle. But these are going to work just fine. I may end up changing this mounting position this way so you can actually shift the bag front to rear instead of left to right. I think left to right doesn't really help you as much, but if it was front to back, depending on where your rear end is, I think that would help more. So if you're watching this and later on you see that the bag placement is this way, it's so you could move the bag back and forth front to back. Because left to right, you can decide that. I mean, really the simple bridge is going to decide where these brackets bolt to the rear end. So right here is where we need to be on the frame. So hopefully whenever I put this bracket here, that it will compress all the way and mount up. I think that's going to be perfect. I compress the bag all the way down, and it's a lot of resistance right there, and I think that's going to be solid right there where we got it. So after you test to make sure the bag will compress all the way and that it's tight right there, that's about the max. So I think the internal bump stops would stop it right about here, because I'm pressing pretty hard. So what we'll do now is I'm going to jack the truck up where it just kind of sits here without pressing it down to match up. And that way I can make some marks to get everything aligned. If this was a taller notch, I would definitely prefer it on the bottom like that. I just think it looks clean right there, and you don't have to worry about the bag getting close to this bracket. But because this is a lower notch on a 60 to 62, I'm going to weld it in up top. That way I just know it compresses all the way and lays frame. I designed this where you could just weld it around this section right here on the actual bridge. You don't have to weld it up against the notch if you don't want to. That way you can kind of move it wherever you want. On a 63 to 72, you're going to have the step notch that steps in. So this bracket is going to be further in. So this right here will be over just a hair and there will be a gap. You could trim it down to match the notch, but this is kind of how it's set up to just mount to the actual simple bridge part, just like we're doing in this video. Hey, check it out. My welds aren't dookie. They look pretty good. I'm getting better. Man, I'm excited about that. Just keep practicing. Once I got that gas set in, I've got the pattern down and it's definitely penetrating well. So that's cool, man. That's encouraging for me. I want to encourage you guys. Just keep practicing. Take your time. Get your machine set up right. This is where mine's at right now. What I've been using, 4, a little over 4, and then my gas right on like 35 when you pull the trigger. And it's doing good. Last step right here is to mock up the bag back to that upper plate and see where this bracket aligns on the rear end. I'm going to mark it and grind down the frame a little bit and get ready to weld that in to the rear end, and then let it all cool down and paint it, install the bag, and it'll be a wrap on this rear setup. Just to give you an idea of what I'm doing here, I bolted up the bag and the hardware and I set the grooves down on the rear end and I just let the air out to make sure everything aligned correctly. And I've got everything kind of set up. This is a good way to make sure you have everything aligned. I'm just going to use a white marker to mark where this is on the frame. Then I'll come back and I'll weld this in. I was going to tack it in the way it is now. I just don't want a weld to get on these bags. They're really nice. So I'm just going to mark it, unbolt it, and then hold the plate up there and weld it in. On these short axle brackets here, you need like a 3/4 inch bolt. You will have to kind of angle it in there, but it will fit. Just slide it up in the hole. I hold it there, and then I actually just go ahead and put the bag, align it with the middle hole, and just spin the bag because it's hard to get in there with your hand. Now all we're going to do is let the jack down and let it sit on the bags. You will have to align them as they go down. So as I mentioned earlier, this was my first design and it actually worked out really good, but I'm going to take this and I'm going to twist it around where the air hose is here and make these bolt mounts slotted this way. That way you could slide the bag forward and backward to get it to align with the rear end. If you're doing a 4-link or you have adjustable trailing arms, you could just adjust the rear end where it's perfectly underneath the bridge. But if I put adjustment up top too, it may save you a little bit of time. The more adjustment, the better on stuff like this. I really think through, you know, everybody's setup is going to be different. So I want to create something in a way that it's universal, but also it's really nice and set up for what we're doing on these trucks. Get our little T set up again. That looks killer. All right, let's check this out. Man, I'm pumped. This thing looks really clean. I love just the overall look of it. Check that out. Just clean and simple with the Watts link, a simple bridge, bag over axle. Check out the back view right here. Bags compressed nicely there. We'll measure in just a second to make sure this is laid out. Now, we don't have the weight of the truck pushing down on the bags. This is kind of just where it was sitting the way it is. But yeah, presses down nicely there. They look compressed, lined up. Very cool. That's it, bag over axle. I mean, there's not a lot to it. You're already doing the simple bridge. You're just welding in those two little plates and then the bottom bracket on the rear end. If you're gonna lay all the way out, the bag over axle kit, the full back half is gonna come with a shorter shock as well. I've got one that's gonna be about 4 inches shorter than the one that goes on the trailing arm style. So we're almost right at an inch lower than we were with the bags on the trailing arms right there. And we were trying to get 2 3/4 from the ground. That's where the front frame is with the drop member. And we're sitting right at 2 3/4 right there. So with this setup, what we got going on right here with lay frame, if I had the middle section cut out in a flat piece of metal, which I may do, I'm not sure yet, when I do the 4-link. So this is one option that you have. This is the basic bag over axle setup that's gonna use your factory trailing arms, or you can add on these tubular trailing arms, which I think the tubular help with nothing hitting. Like there's a lot of clearance right here on the 63 to 72. The tubular arms, I think, will keep you from having to trim the inside of the frame. If anybody knows that for sure, post in the comments. But worst case, you would have to trim off about 1/4 of an inch right here where the trailing arm hits the frame. But on this setup, bag over axle, this thing is gonna go to the ground. This is actually a really good measurement because this is 1 3/4, and before this was 2 3/4. So we know that inch is how much it dropped right now. Without the weight of the truck on there, we already have our inch that we needed. That's all you need in the back to lay the frame, because the bag on the trailing arm just compresses and you just need about this much. Next week, I'm gonna take off these trailing arms and I'm gonna bolt up that simple C10 4-link that I've been working with Alex V Metalworks on. He's the one that makes a Watts link. We made a 4-link specifically for these trucks. It's gonna bolt into the frame and then weld on to the rear end. Basically the same way that the Watts link does. It has adjustable hind joints so you can adjust your pinion angle. But when we get that, man, this thing is gonna be sweet. This is the first on a lot for me on this first bag over axle. Whenever we get the 4-link on there, we can adjust our rear end and the notch and really align everything nicely. So again, we are sitting at 1 3/4 right now on the notch. Let's air this thing up and see how much lift we get. So we're sitting right at 6 1/4 inches. So that's about 4 1/2 inches of lift with just a little bit of pressure in the bag. It could go a little bit higher than that, but that's the difference between a bag over axle, where you're getting 1-to-1 ratio of lift, and a trailing arm is a pendulum style. So when the bag is mounted on the trailing arm, you get about 6 inches of lift. But with this setup, you could ride probably 50, 60, 70 pounds of pressure maybe, and be at a plenty enough ride height. This is designed to lay frame, but also designed to ride really low. So let's air it down a little bit to about where a ride height would be, and I'm gonna jump down on it and test it a little bit. So right here, we're sitting about 4 inches off of the ground. This would be ride height. And what's beautiful about this is right at where the mid travel was whenever we did the Watts link. So check that out. It's perfect. Like, this is a perfect ride height right here. And once I get the shocks in there too, the ride is going to be so smooth. Check that out. Everything just feels really solid. That's a good pressure. But man, check that out. Let's walk around. Let's just look at it. I'm excited. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, just watching this come along. I love this stuff, and I love designing and just how good this ended up looking. Check out the bags right there, just straight up and down at ride height. It's really nice. You know, plenty of pressure in the bags, but not too much pressure. Plenty of clearance within the frame right here. So if you're a 60 to 62 or 63 to 72, you've got trailing arms on your truck and you want to lay frame, this is the kit that I would go with. This is the basic bag over axle kit that has the simple bridge with the brackets on there, the rear shock relocation kit, the optional trailing arms. I'm going to put those where you can add them on. The do-it-yourself slam kit, the Watts link in the back. It's going to give you everything to get this look on your truck. So that's a wrap on this video. I just wanted to say thank you so much for your support. Everybody that buys stuff from the website, I just really appreciate it so much. I put in a lot of time, a lot of effort into doing these videos, answering all the questions. I'm learning a lot. This has taught me a lot doing this for the first time. So I hope that it's helping the community. Man, I love just hearing about people's builds and seeing them at the car shows. That's so exciting for me, and I really do appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for that. Stay tuned to this build. On the next video, I'm going to be installing that 4-link, the Simple C10 4-link. That's going to go with the Watts link and all the other stuff that I'm offering now. I'm going to leave you guys with one more walk around, checking this thing out, and I'll see you on the next video. Reach out if you need anything. Shoot me a message, text, call, whatever. My number is 615-578-4540. People may think I am insane for sharing my phone number, but guess what? That's okay. I can block you. But I'm here to answer any questions that you have. Hope everybody has a great day. To the next one. Peace. So I just had to see how low it's going to sit. I took it off all the little roller things. It's sitting flat on the ground, and the middle section is flat on the ground, and that's holding us up about an inch and a half right now. But if it wasn't for that middle section, which I'm probably just going to come tomorrow or the next day and just cut that off and put a flat piece, because when I do the Porterbuilt frame, I'm going to cut all that middle section out. I didn't really want to climb under there and cut it, and I'm going to have to, because I want to see that frame all the way on the ground. But you can see right here, it is just about an inch from laying on the ground, and the only thing stopping it is that middle cross member right there. You can see the back is an inch, and we still have, you know, inch and a half to go on the frame back here, and it will lay that frame out all the way. So this bag over axle setup, definitely gonna lay the truck out on the frame, and I will probably the next video or on a reel or something like that, I'll show you. I'll go ahead and cut that middle section out just to test it, because I want to make sure, even though I'm not leaving it like that, I want you guys to know that, hey, if I did a Porterbuilt drop member in this bag over axle setup, I'm laying frame. But I can tell you right now, you're gonna, because with the frame level at right an inch off the ground, and the middle part is holding us up, and there's still a lot of movement in the bag. You can see right here, that bag still has this much more room to flatten out, because there was only, I mean, heck, there was only 1 3/4 inches right here. So we're talking 1.5 inches, 1 3/4 inches of more drop in the back. So anyway, I hate to leave you on a cliffhanger like this, but I was editing the video and I said, you know what, I'm going to go out there and take it off of the little crib things and at least get an eyeball, and then we can test it later on. But on to the next one, guys. Thanks for watching again. This thing looks sick.